Today's webinar is going to be about the company billing report. And this is a really important report from a financial standpoint for any type of business. This report will give you details about every different charge you're generating for the services and products that you are providing to your customers. So from a service standpoint, we're talking about tuition charges for your classes, late fees, event fees, other types of services. And for products, we're talking about merchandise, gym bags, leotards, costumes, food and drink items, anything that you sell at your business, whether that's a service or a product. Well, let's jump right in. I've got my ClassJuggler account up here, and I'm going to go over to my test account. And I've got a sample dance and gymnastics company here that we're going to look at some financial data on. So again, it's really important from a business standpoint to understand what you're billing out in products and services so that at the end of the month you can budget, look at what your income should be, compare that to what you're receiving in payments using some of the other financial reports in the system. Let's go ahead and take a look at our preferences prior to jumping into the report itself. There's a couple important preference screens that we want to talk about that are really key to getting good information out about the products and services that you're billing for. The first of these is charge account categories. So as many of you know, the charge account categories represent labels or reference points for different transactions. So for any type of transaction, whether that's a merchandise transaction or a service transaction, I can add a label to that, in this case, an account category, to give that particular transaction more meaning. So some examples, we have a top level category here called competition team fees. And that's been broken down into more detail at a second level, including things like audition fees, solo fees, workshop fees, and then even to a third and fourth level for Tremaine, observers, solo, and team. We also have some merchandise categories, for example, costumes, and that's broken down into 3 sub-account categories, as well as DVDs, photos, other merchandise, performance fees, things like that. So this gives you a really flexible way of creating all sorts of detail for your financial reporting. Now alone, account categories don't do anything. They need to be attached to certain transactions, whether that's linking them into a class record so that we can break apart the tuition that's being billed by an account category, or to events, which is similar to doing classes, but for short one-time or one-day events, as well as all of your merchandise accounts, things again like costumes, food, DVDs, photos, gym bags, clothing, etc. So this is our account categories table. We're going to take a look at one other preference screen called the charge and tax accounts. And you'll kind of see how these all start tying together. So I'm going to scroll down just a little bit to see more of this table. These are the actual accounts that we're going to be generating transactions against. Things like tuition, late fees, registration, and then all of the custom ones that we've built in as a business. Things like these recital costume fees, locker rentals, recital photos, miscellaneous workshops. If you look to the right of each one of those charge accounts, there's a column called account category, and this is where we can link in those charge account categories that we created on that other preference screen. So you'll see here, if I click on that particular recital costume, I can scroll down and see where that's been linked in to that hierarchical table of account categories. And again, so not only am I generating a charge against the recital costume fee 75, I'm also labeling that under the recital costumes, which lives under the costumes level in our account categories. And this will make a little bit more sense once we start running some examples. And if I scroll this table down, you'll see there's a lot of different charge accounts. Many of them are linked to account categories using that right column. Now let's jump over to our reports menu. I'm going to scroll down to our financial reports section, and then we're going to select the company billing report. And there's a lot of different options in how we can run this report. The easiest way to run it is to show a report type of all charges, generating the report results right to just a PDF file so I can see it right on my screen. I could also send it to a CSV file that I could then import into my favorite spreadsheet program and manipulate it, delete columns, rearrange it, add other types of subtotals, copy that data into other things. Very flexible for manipulating the data. I can also filter by customer category, instructor, account category, again that hierarchical table that we built in preferences. So this lets me get down to a very fine level of detail when I'm running the report. Or I could do it just by the top level charge account, whether if I want to use tuition, which is down here at the very bottom. That's a built-in charge account that ClassJuggler created for you, and it represents all class tuition in the system with no detail levels. But I could choose tuition and then break that down by any classes that I may have associated with tuition in a different account category. Then I can either choose a quick month and year if I just want to do a particular month, for example, June 2016. If I select that from the quick drop-down, it's going to set the beginning and ending date appropriately to cover that entire month. Or I can come down here and change this to any valid date I want. For example, I want to report on the first half of the year, January through, let's change this back to June 30th. And then I also have some additional options. Things like showing the transaction details. For example, if a particular charge had tax line items or even discount line items, if I wanted to see those in my report, I just check this option. If I want to see it broken down by the charge account category hierarchy, I'm going to want to choose group and order the transactions by the account category, and then also choose an account category as my reference point to start with. And I can also group and order transactions by the customer's name. The sort order by default is going to be by the transaction date, but again, I could go by the customer's last name. Let's do customer last name, and let's look at the first half of this year for all types of transactions, all instructors. I'm going to change this back to no charge account. And let's just see what we get in our results. So I'm going to click on generate, and then usually pretty quickly, we get a nice report here, and this is in our Adobe Acrobat PDF. I'm going to shrink this down just a little bit so we can fit this on the screen a little better. And here's our report. It's a big report. It's actually 78 pages long, which is pretty typical. This represents a lot of history from 6 months of transactions. And remember, this is being grouped by customer. So I can look in here, starting with Jessica Abbott back in January of 2016, all of her charges, and then we shift over to Teresa Aberg and all of her charges. She has quite a few. And I get descriptions, customer ID numbers, and the amounts of each and every one of those transactions. And then if we were to scroll this all the way to the end, to page 78, we're going to see a nice set of subtotals as well as the grand total of all of this billing activity that we've posted to the account. So as you can see, this represents $222,929 in transactions. There were 41 credits totaling $3,335 for a net of our 2,241 transactions during that 6-month period of $219,594. So right there, you've got a great amount of information, plus all the detail. This is great for the business owner, as well as the bookkeeper or accountant that's working with you for getting information. So I just looked at this at a very high level. Now let's take a look at running this report in a little more detail. One of the things I can do is change the report type to look at some of the major built-in categories of ClassJuggler. For example, tuition charges, event charges, registration, late fee. Those are the 4 charge accounts that are built into ClassJuggler. Or I could combine tuition and event because they're often quite related. Or look at anything that's not in one of the 4 built-in charge accounts, late fee, registration, event, or tuition, which generally represents things like merchandise or other odds and ends. Let's just take a look at tuition charges during that same period of time. I'm going to run the report again. It loads, and here's our new report. This one's a little shorter, 43 pages. Again, if I scroll it to the bottom, I'll get my subtotals and totals. So we can see that of that $221,000 of total business we did, from that prior report, $145,757.50 was tuition. Everything else was merchandise, other types of services that we're providing to our customers. Let's get down to a little bit more detail here. I'm going to change this back to all charges. And now we're going to take a look at things from the charge account category. So if I want to really break this down, let's say I just need to know all the different types of team fees that we're billing, including all of the subcategories, things like the entry fees, audition, monthly, solo, and even down to a 3rd and 4th level, down to these observer, solo dance fees in our Tremaine category. So all I need to do is choose that account category. I don't need to choose a charge account. And I need to check that I want to group and order everything on that report by the account category. What that's going to do is allow that report to show kind of a bottom-up view, looking at the lowest level of detail, rolling it up to those subcategories. So for example, if I again pull up that table, and I start at the very bottom of the charge account category I selected, which is the competition team fees, if I look down to the lowest level, that's any one of these 3 items. The Tremaine observer fee, solo dance fee, or team dance fee. And again, these can be anything that you want or that are meaningful to your business. So it's going to start showing us anything at the lowest level. It's going to roll it up and give us totals at each low level. Then it's going to show us anything organized at the next highest level with totals and subtotals of all the lower levels. And again, moving up to the next level, those items, and again, rolled up to subtotals and totals at the very top parent level of that account category hierarchy that we created. Let's go ahead and run this and see what we get. So boom, of all those transactions out there, not all of them are labeled or organized into account categories, so I get a much shorter report. It could be that I just don't have a lot of transactions in those categories, or I added those categories later in the year, so not all of the transaction history starting from January 1st has been labeled with one of those account categories. But let's take a look at what type of information we're getting here. So we see a number of charges. Here's for team audition fee, and we can see the category subtotal, as well as any credits that were issued. Here's a particular credit on this line item here. And it shows us a nice description of where we're getting this total from. So you'll see competition team fees is the very top category, subtotal down to competition team audition fees. And as I page through this report, as soon as I see the next subtotal, here's one down here at the bottom of this page. So it's telling me now in competition team fees, I'm looking at team monthly fees, which is $63.30. And that's really valuable for me to see as well. I'm going to scroll down to our next subtotal. This one was for competition team solo fees, again under our top level category of competition team fees. And now we're at the very end of our report, and we get our final subtotals for any remaining categories. In this case, Tremaine's. And you'll notice once that's done, it'll also roll that up to the next highest level, which is the competition team workshop fees, and then all the way to the very top level, which is the competition team fees. So I've got totals, subtotals at each level, I can see all the detail broken out like I want, so that I can organize anything, whether it's merchandise at a top level with a breakout for things like clothing or food and drink, and then maybe breaking out clothing into more detail, like girls' clothing, boys' clothing, or competition leotards for our gymnasts, or costumes for our dance competitions. And then even breaking those down into further categories, maybe by the type of performance or the type of competition that was in. So the sky's the limit on how you want to break things up, and it can give you a lot more or a lot deeper visibility into the types of transactions and where your money is being earned in your business. It's also great from looking at things like merchandise to say, what are we selling the most of? Rather than only having a top level to say merchandise and getting a single total, if I broke that merchandise down into subcategories, I could run the report, see all those subtotals and the grand total in a single report, showing me where I'm selling certain merchandise more than others, and I might want to stock more of that to make more money for my business. So again, let's go back to the report. You can report by account category as long as you've set those up and you've generated transactions in your ClassJuggler account since those have been set up. Or you can run it at the charge account level, picking any particular single charge account that you want to see detail on, whether that's one that you've added yourself or even a top level one like the tuition charge account category here, which will give us all the tuition that was generated in the system. That's also the same as choosing tuition up top here as the report type. That basically by default, you'll notice that hides the charge account row because we basically said we want to see tuition charges, so we don't need to further define that we need to see tuition charges again. This is a very flexible and important report for your business, and I hope you've learned a little bit about how to use the company billing report in ClassJuggler. And we'll take a few minutes here at the end of this presentation for questions, and thanks so much for attending. Happy juggling!